This is horticulturist Jessica Walliser from SavvyGardening.com and KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh. You're listening to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Show with your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Holly, let's go to the Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Plant Garden Hotline and bring in Jessica Walliser.
Jessica Walliser is an author, gardener, radio show host. She's the host of the Organic Gardener on KDKA, or the co-host, in Pittsburgh. She's a blogger, columnist, and all-around horticultural and botanical enthusiast. She lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the program, Jessica.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, Joey. How are you guys?
We are doing well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on the program and enlighten Holly and myself and all of our listeners.
It is my pleasure. I'm always happy to join you guys. We always have a good time.
Absolutely. So let's start with this. We've had a tremendous issue with weeds in our garden. I've spent time weeding prior to planting, and it seems like I have just encouraged the weeds to come with a garden fork and removing the roots. That haven't seemed to work very well. How do you deal with weeds, and what is the best method that you have found to get them out and keep them out?
Excellent question. Well, I suppose in a lot of ways it depends on the type of weed that you're dealing with. Certainly annual weeds. Here, my biggest problem is Pennsylvania smartweed, which is actually easy to pull out. It's just a pain because it reseeds everywhere. So with annual weeds, it's super important that you never let them go to seed. So even if you have a big weed issue and you can't get to hand pulling them, at least, weed whack them or mow them down so that they don't set seed and make more problems for you the following year. If you're talking about perennial weeds like Canada thistle or really horrible ones like bindweed, I always like to do the barrier method. So in my vegetable garden, in areas where that's a problematic, situation, before I plant, I'll put down 10 sheets thick of newspaper, and then I will cover that with usually shredded leaves or straw, and then I'll plant right down through it. So I'll cut an X in the newspaper and plant down through it and leave it in place the entire season, and that really sort of forms like a physical barrier to keep those weeds from coming up through it. And that works best for me.
That's a really good, definitely really good tip.
And people will often say, I'll just use the glyphosate, and that'll kill them. But the problem that the glyphosate has, it stays in the soil and makes the soil extremely toxic for what you're trying to plant. These are not genetically modified crops, so that's what people often say.
Now, for people growing in small spaces such as urban gardening, especially vegetables, what is some advice you can give for one that is new to gardening in those small spaces?
Yeah, so, if you're gardening in a small space, or a large space, it doesn't matter. If you're new to it, you want to start small. So don't go out and put in a giant vegetable garden or install 10 raised beds or something like that. Start with one raised bed, or start with a few containers on a sunny patio or deck, and really just sort of dip your toes into the experience of vegetable gardening. And then once you have a little bit of success, then you can gradually increase the space. The other bit of advice I would give is don't get discouraged, because not everybody, even long-time gardeners, we fail at things sometimes, right? I'm growing this great little container watermelon called Sugar Pot, and I've grown it 3 years in a row, and 2 of the 3 years, I've had success, and then the other year it didn't work out so well. So, there's going to be times that things don't work the way you want them to, but don't let that stop you from continuing to try again. And certainly for small space gardeners, varietal selection means everything, because if you're just growing in a small area, a little raised bed or a little pot, you don't want to grow a tomato that's going to grow 8 feet tall. You want to grow a tomato that's going to grow 18 inches to 24 inches tall. So choose your varieties really carefully.
Well, you speak about failure, and you stand next to a guy each Sunday morning on KDK Radio who has grown for many, many years and is not able to grow garlic. At least the last time we spoke to him. Has he been able to achieve that accomplishment yet?
If you're talking about Doug, he's an excellent garlic grower, but what he can't grow for the life of him are onions.
Onions, that's what it is.
Onions. And I keep telling him, I said, Doug, you need to test the pH of your soil, because I'll bet you the pH is too acidic, which, inhibits the absorption of phosphorus and the availability of phosphorus in the soil. And as you and I know, bulb crops like that, root crops, love phosphorus. And it doesn't matter how much you add, if the pH of the soil isn't right, the plants can't access it. So I keep telling him, but he won't listen to me. He never listens to me. What are you going to do?
Well, and Shauna Cornata, you talked about plants dying. Shauna Cornata, she's been on the program, and she has quoted that you have to kill at least 1,000 plants before you're considered at least a decent gardener. So I think we're all
I love that.
all qualified in that realm somewhere or another. Many people do not realize you can grow fruit in small spaces, and you've got several great books that illustrate this. What are some great fruits to grow in containers, and why do they work so well?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the main reasons why I wrote my most recent book, which is Gardener's Guide to Compact Plants. And that's because there's all of these amazing compact fruit, vegetables, shrubs, perennials that stay small and compact. They're out there on the market, but so many gardeners don't know about them. So, for example, if you're looking to grow compact fruits, I would recommend the dwarf raspberries and blackberries as a good place to start. There's a dwarf raspberry called raspberry shortcake that gets only about 2 feet tall. I have a raised bed of 4x8 raised bed of them in my backyard, and they're fantastic. They don't take over the space. They stay really small. You can grow them in a pot. There's also certainly dwarf blueberries, like jelly bean and top hat and blueberry glaze, and those guys stay small. They're self-fertile, so you only need one plant, not two. You don't need a cross-pollinator. Strawberries are always a great idea for small spaces. And then there's the fruit trees. There are now some super dwarf fruit trees that are not grafted, so you don't have to still prune them to keep them small. They're a genetic dwarf. And my favorite is a peach called Pixzee, Pixzee, and it gets only 5 feet tall and a spread of about 4 feet or so, and it's beautiful in like a 50-gallon pot or a 35-gallon pot on the patio, and it produces full-size peaches. It's amazing.
So when you talk about these dwarf plants, now these are hybridized, or are these heirloom, or a combination that we're finding these and we're not hybridizing these?
It depends. It depends on the particular variety that you're talking about. Some of them are hybrid. Some, in the case of Pixie, it's a genetic dwarf. So it happened by a chance mutation. And somebody's, I don't know the true story of it, the background of it, but usually what happens is you have a true genetic dwarf like that in a sampling of plants grown, and one just happens to have that trait, and then that from there it's vegetatively propagated, so that trait is then in all of the offspring. They're cloned. They're taken like a cutting of it, right? Vegetatively propagated. So they're not grafted onto a dwarfing rootstock. Instead, that's actually the true genetics of the plant, which is extra cool because you don't have to worry about protecting a graft union or the rootstock sprouting or something like that. It's
just what nature did, and we're able to continue on that benefit that it's provided for us.
Exactly. Right. And there's a nectarine too that's a true genetic dwarf. It's called Nectazee, Nectazee, and also another true genetic dwarf. Really cool.
Okay, so when we talk about small space gardening, many people think of urban settings, maybe people who live in a city where they have a small yard, or they have a balcony or a patio or something that they want to grow on. But maybe there's people out there who have a huge yard, but they don't want to grow on that huge yard. What are the advantages to small space gardening, as opposed to if you do have a lot of space available? What are some advantages that are applicable to just about anybody?
Yeah, Holly, that's a great question because, I have 2 acres here, but I grow lots of these compact plants that I talk about in Gardener's Guide to Compact Plants. And one of the biggest reasons for me, especially when it comes to the trees and shrubs, is it's no pruning required, right? So you don't have to go out every spring and, prune your viburnums or your lilacs or your rhododendrons as soon as they're done blooming in order to keep them small and compact so that they fit in your foundation planting. Instead, we're looking at varieties of these plants that stay naturally compact, and fit beautifully in those spaces. So it's really all about the reduction in maintenance. And same thing with some of the compact perennials. Maybe you have a space around a pool or around your patio or deck, and you don't want to interfere with your sight line, or you don't want to have to go out and stake and support those plants because they get so floppy. So if you grow a more compact variety, you're eliminating that maintenance task as well.
And just because you grow in a small space with a compact variety does not mean that plant's not going to produce. A lot of these are very prolific producers, and you can still get quite a bit out of that very small space.
Absolutely. And, in the case of a lot of the perennials, their sort of cultural habits are the same as their full-grown cousins, right? So the varieties or other cultivars of that plant. So let's take Monarda or bee balm as an example. The compact varieties, they bloom just as long as the full-size varieties. If you, cut them back after they bloom, they'll produce many times a second flush of blooms, just like the full-size one does. So you have all the bloom power or all the fruiting or vegetable production out of the plant, but it's just in a neater, tidier package.
So your new book, The Gardener's Guide to Compact Plants, just like your other books, phenomenal publication, great pictures, great information, and we always know when you got a new book coming out because the mailman delivers it to our home, which is really cool. But can you tell us more about what's in the book and what our listeners can expect when they open the book up to learn about growing in small spaces and compact areas with compact plants?
Absolutely. A lot of it is sort of an extension of what the great questions were that you guys asked me today. I talk about selecting and maintaining compact plants, what the difference is between, these varieties and full-size varieties. I also talk about where they come from, how are they bred, how are they selected, why do we look for these traits, and where can you buy them, right? Where do you find them on the market? There's a resource section in the back of the book that will help you with that. I also have a section on using compact plants to solve problems, like what do you do if you have a slope in your garden, or you have a lot of shade, or you want to, you have a neighbor who, has junk in their yard and you want to block that view. So what kind of compact plants do you use for privacy screening? And then the whole back part of the book is profiles of specific trees, shrubs, perennials, fruits and vegetables and herbs that are varieties that are small in stature, that are perfect for gardeners who either want reduced maintenance or they want to grow in a smaller space.
It's definitely, I think for a lot of our listeners, it's very applicable to them. So how can we find out more about you? Obviously a radio show host, but you're an author. Where can people get all of your great information?
So I would recommend they go to one of my two websites, and the first is a more informational gardening resource website, which is Savvy Gardening, SAVVY gardening.com. And if they want to know specifically about me, my lectures and classes and things like that, they can go to my personal website, which is jessicawalliser.com.
Well, Jessica, we greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us on the program and sharing a lot of your knowledge with us and our listeners.
Oh, it's always so much fun to join you guys. I love watching your YouTube videos and getting to know you better, too.
Absolutely, Will. Thank you very much for that.
Jessica. For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.